Hey everyone, welcome to the AP Lit Live review sessions. This is, I think, like week 5. It's crazy, and it's our last full week of content driven videos. We will have some practice sessions next week, but this is the last week of live instruction. So we'll tell you more about those practice sessions at the end of the week. I'm Susan Barber from Grady High School. I'm actually like in my room right now. It's kind of crazy. We're getting major renovations here and have to pack up our room. I feel like I'm like in some post-apocalyptic world. I came in, mask, gloves, took our temperature. No one can be in here with us. We're all spaced out accordingly, only a few people in the building, and I'm packing up my room. It's just, I've been messaging my kids a lot today because it's just really sad. Like, I don't like being in this space without them. So I'm not going to get emotional right now, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's a sad morning to be up here. But I finally have a backdrop that is as good as Mr. Escobar's library. So I'm excited about that. I wanted to give a shout out to a few classes before I hand it over to Mr. Escobar. Miss Murray's class in West Ypsilanti High School, Long Island. Hi to y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Mr. Rosenberg's class from York High School in York, Maine. We're excited to have y'all with us, and we are definitely going to take you up on that lobster roll when we come to visit. And finally, Miss Green's class in Venice High School in the LA area. Love that area. Hi to y'all, and to all of the rest of you watching. We are glad you're with us. Mr. Escobar, how was your weekend?
My weekend was great, and I got to tell you, when I heard from you and you told me that you were going back into your building, I felt for you and for all of us a little bit because it must be such an eerie feeling to walk in and not have the students be there, and it's just so desolate when the kids are gone.
Mhm.
So my heart goes out to you and to all of us because we're all gonna have to go in at some point and God willing, be able to pick up our stuff and just get ready for next school year. But looking forward, right? Looking forward
Yep.
always, and with a smile on our faces. I definitely want to take up Mr. Rosenberg, like you mentioned. My family and I were in Maine about a year ago, and we had we had we had one or two lobster rolls, but there's always space for more. So Mr. Rosenberg in York, Maine, Miss Barbara and I might descend upon you at some point. And I also want to say hello to Mr. Walters, and this is a very this one hit close to home. This is very special for me. Mr. Walters teaches in Managua, Nicaragua, and that's where I was born. And I haven't been back to Managua since we left. So it's been 35, almost 36 years. So I will certainly be writing and connecting with Mr. Walters. And I want to say hello to all the students out there. Nos veremos pronto. Nos vamos a reunir because we will definitely Zoom. We're gonna do something with Mr. Walters because it's the closest that I've gotten back to Nicaragua. So without any further delay, let's get into today's lesson. We had asked you to look at this sample body paragraph and talk about where you might add some things, right, Miss Barber?
Yeah, and honestly, there's really no way to go over this. I would say if you're wanting some feedback on your paragraph, reach out to your teacher, share it with them. But here's the thing, if you are answering the why questions in these places and really diving into analysis and how to extend the argument, character development, motivation. If you're answering the author intent, if you're answering the why question, you are moving your argument forward. So that's the most important thing. And we want you to just get in the habit of when you write to just continually be asking, why, why, why? So what? How can I take this argument even further. So again, if you're answering those questions, you're moving your argument forward and have done a good job. Today, we want to talk about not only writing a thesis statement, but writing a thesis statement that may help establish a line of reasoning. So we have talked a couple of lessons about what it makes, what a good thesis statement takes. You need to have a defensible claim. Like that's really the most important thing. You just cannot reiterate or summarize the prompt. You have to have an answer to the prompt, something that's defensible. Now, we've talked also separately about line of reasoning, and today we're going to kind of marry those two and talk about how your thesis statement can set you up to have a line of reasoning. Remember, we don't want just this barely good enough thesis statement, because while that will earn you the point on line A, it doesn't set you up to write a good essay. And so we really want to think about what can we do to formulate a thesis statement that will assure that you have a line of reasoning, and then you're set up not only to get a point on row A, but to get in that 3 and 4 range on row B. And more importantly than that, big picture, once you learn how to do this, then you will be positioned to write good essays in the future as well. And this is so important. I read some of my students' essays this weekend and just saw how their body paragraphs, a lot of times these body paragraphs were organized by device, and they did not say anything other than identifying the device. There was no like original insight with them. And they just kept proving the same thing over and over, just different examples of how they saw one thing. So it didn't have a line of reasoning. There was no progression in their argument. So that's what we're going to spend today talking about.
Yeah, and we are grounded, absolutely grounded on the new rubric. And someone asked me, so I received an email. Someone asked me if we are developing a rubric specifically for this year's exam, and the answer is no, although there is a brand new rubric for this year's course and every year thereafter, right? So we're not using the 9-point holistic rubric we used to use. We're using the 6-point rubric that was released this past summer and that we will use in the foreseeable future on the AP exam. The same person asked us also about a rumor out there that students are saying that the College Board is only going to award scores of 3s, 4s, and 5s this year. As much as I would love for that to be true for my students, the answer is no. AP scores, as always, range from 1 through 5, and we're going to see the spectrum. The spectrum of scores will be there. So you're not guaranteed a qualifying score if you simply sit for the exam. So there's the answer to those two questions that we received. I show this, we show this because we want you to see that in the scoring notes for the rubric, there's a bullet point down here that says the thesis may establish a line of reasoning that structures the essay, but it needn't do so to earn the thesis point. And this is alluding to what Miss Barber just said. We can do more in the thesis than what is required to earn the point. So this is one notion out there. We can answer the question, but we can also establish a line of reasoning within our response. And we're going to see what that means exactly. And if we look at row B, which is the evidence and commentary row, we see that as soon as we move away from the 2-point column and we enter the 3-point column, the language is all about line of reasoning.
Mhm.
Look at under 2 points, look under evidence. It says provides some specific relevant evidence. Under 3 points for evidence, it says provide specific evidence to support all claims in a line of reasoning. And then we get the line of reasoning down here in the scoring notes as well. Organize an argument as a line of reasoning composed of multiple supporting claims. So we see it in both the thesis row and in the row and in the evidence and commentary row that this notion of line of reasoning is significant to um, the essay and to how points will be awarded under this rubric. So let's look at some thesis statements here. These are all student samples, so they're spelled in context. The first one says, and the following interchange. And we're sticking with Zenobia for the examples because this is a prompt and a passage that I think you're all familiar with now. We've had a lot of homework assignments. We've mentioned it um, many times in our lessons. So we're going to stick to this just for the sake of using something that's familiar to all of us. In the following interchange, excerpted from Nathaniel Hawthorne novel, portrays the narrator's love and obsession for Zenobia. Throughout the section, the author uses a lot of diction and imagery to signify the narrator's attitude towards Zenobia. Well, this thesis tells us that the narrator feels love and obsession for Zenobia. So that right there will earn this thesis the point. Let's look at the second one. Nathaniel Hawthorne shows the way the narrator feels about Zenobia in the few paragraphs. The narrator feels as though Zenobia may not be entirely authentic. He feels spite towards her and her new life after Blithedale. Hawthorne is able to portray these feelings through the use of first-person point of view and sophisticated diction. These literary techniques establish the tense tone of the excerpt. What we get here is this notion that the narrator feels as though Zenobia may not be entirely authentic and he feels spite towards her. But notice how it's worded. It's, I'm going to argue this one point, and I'm also going to talk about this other point, but the language itself isn't creating a link between these two, and it's also not portraying a development of ideas. It's sort of saying, I'm going to make this claim and I'm going to make this claim, but it's not linking the claims in any progressive way. Look at the third one. This is the more complex thesis, even though it's not the longest one. So it's not about just who writes the longest thesis, but it's about certain elements that are included within it. The shift. Now, Miss Barber wants to stop right there and say something. I know it,
Yes, I
right?
mean, that's already a great start because we know that if you're identifying shifts in the passage, you're setting yourself up for this happened before and now this happened. You're seeing some type of contrast shift, and that's automatically, I mean, I shouldn't say automatically, but almost always that's going to, if you unpack the before and the after, that's going to establish your line of reasoning.
Right, as long as you follow through, you're
As
signaling
long as you follow
correctly,
through.
right? The shift and internal resolution that the narrator experiences creates a resolution in her attitude towards Zenobia, where at first she was complacent in her acceptance of Zenobia's opulent lifestyle, she turns scornful and resentful as she regains control over Zenobia's proud aura and facade. Again, everything spelled in context. So let's take a look at this, okay? Is the answer provided? Do we know the narrator's attitude towards Zenobia? Well, I can see here that um, she felt acceptance towards Zenobia, maybe towards Zenobia's opulent lifestyle. But then I see that there is scorn and resentment. And what we really want to pay attention to here is the language. The language, where at first she turns, right? These are signals to the reader that there is a development of ideas, where at first she was complacent in her acceptance, she turns scornful and resentful. Notice the difference between this thesis statement and the previous one we looked at, where it said, I'm going to argue A and I'm going to argue B, but it doesn't put those two claims in working off of each other. Whereas here we do see the progression. It's such a subtle difference. Now, I also want to say this. If you're struggling with essay writing, if you're struggling with the thesis point, don't focus on this, right? We're doing what we would do in our classrooms. We have to teach at every level, right? So this is the student who can nail the thesis over and over and over again. There's no problem earning that point. But now that student can be taken one notch higher, and they can start creating the line of reasoning or establishing, laying out the blueprint for the line of reasoning within the thesis. Anything to add there, Ms. Barber?
No, I just love it. I love it. Love it. We know exactly where this essay is going.
And the beauty of it is that then the student can take this and create the topic sent. They're written for her or him
Correct.
already, right?
Right.
Let's look at how line of reasoning would function in the body. And what we have here is an excerpt. We don't have a full body paragraph. So if you look at what we've included in these brackets, these ellipses, something happens before this. So we get presumably a topic sentence, maybe some evidence and commentary, and then we have this middle section, and then the paragraph will continue. So let's read it. It is beautiful, the fulfillment of every fantasy of the imagination. But although the narrator is dazzled, he is uneasy and feels a bitter sense of shame. Hawthorne magnifies this feeling of shame through terms such as costly indulgence and redundance of personal ornament. The narrator expresses his disapproval of Zenobia's overly indulgent lifestyle, which is fundamentally, I assume, different
Mm-hmm.
from the values of his own community. He further, now, when we talk about line of reasoning, we're talking about the function of claim, evidence, and commentary. And we're also talking about not just the development of that commentary, but also the words that guide the um, the argument. In terms of
That
the
move
evidence and
the
commentary,
argument. Yeah, it
forward,
moves
right?
the
It
argument
propels it.
forward. Hmm.
Let's deal with that notion of moving the argument forward. He is uneasy and feels a bitter sense of shame. That's a very it's a perfectly good statement, but it leaves us stagnant. This is how we feel, right? But then the beauty is this:
Hmm.
Hawthorne magnifies this feeling of shame. In
Hmm.
other words, the narrator is uneasy and feels a bitter sense of shame. I've already characterized the attitude, but now I'm arguing that Hawthorne, the writer, manipulates the language, manipulates the scene to magnify the feeling of shame. In other words, there's a progression, there's a logical progression. We're being moved by the language. We're not just
Hmm.
drawing a conclusion, and that's where we begin and where we end. And you've spoken about this a lot, Miss Barber, right? Where are we at the end of the passage
Hmm.
as opposed to where we were in the beginning? So the language here is moving the argument forward, and we see also beautifully done the use of evidence and commentary, right? This whole notion of that it is fundamentally different from the values of his own community is
Hmm.
getting into why the feelings of shame are magnified in the narrator. So this is a way of establishing and continuing the line of reasoning within the body paragraph. So what we've looked at so far, and I think this is one of those videos that you're going to have to watch a couple times and then you're
Hmm.
going to have to practice. We're going to establish line of reasoning. We can establish it in the thesis the way we saw, right? We sort of lay the blueprint for what the argument is going to be and how the argument is going to move forward. And then in the body paragraphs, we also establish the line of reasoning by having a strong claim, providing evidence. The claim, remember, comes from the thesis. The evidence, there should be multiple instances of evidence. Oh, they should be concise. Ms. Barber talked about no fewer than 9 words, no more than 9 words. It could be as few as 1 or 2 words,
Hmm.
right? But there has to be commentary that follows. You can't just say the attitude is shameful and then put a quote and then move on. No, you have to comment on the degree of the shame, how the shame connects to the thesis statement, how it speaks about humanity, how it speaks about Hawthorne, how it speaks about whatever connection you can make. That's where your interpretation is expounded. And remember, there's words and phrases. Words and phrases. Hawthorne magnifies this feeling of shame. That was one example where at first she turns. Now, this isn't for you to copy and use on the AP exam. My writing for me is very organic. I don't give my students any formulas. Nothing is a plugin or a Mad Lib, but get get the sound, right? Get the feel for what it means to progress an idea, to move an idea forward. And I bet that if you look through your essays, there are subtle ways in which you're already doing this. I just want you to bring it to your consciousness, bring it to your frontal lobe to make sure that you execute accordingly on the exam.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think a lot of these things students are already doing or they know they should be doing, but we don't really pull them out in isolation and look at them. And so that's what a lot of these lessons are targeted to do. Let's look at one thing in isolation and focus on that. Because we spend most of our time looking at essays holistically and as a whole.
Mhm.
So by thinking about line of reasoning, going through your paper, and maybe you go through the Zenobia paper that you've already written and just highlight through what is my line of reasoning? Can I clearly see that? That's an exercise that is worth your time.
And if I'm not
Or how
mistaken,
can I
this,
make it stronger?
yeah, and making it stronger requires the combination of everything we've talked about, right?
Mhm.
And I think that this is the last video where we're really going to focus on one thing. And after this, it's really about the composite, about putting it all
Right.
together
Yep.
in a sophisticated manner. What
Yep.
should an essay look like after you have executed all of these ideas and asked yourself all of those questions that we have told you to try to make second nature for yourselves? For this check for understanding section, I think the challenge is big. Here is a body paragraph, and we want to look at it in terms of line of reasoning. We want to look at it in terms of the claim, evidence, and commentary, and the words and phrases that are provided. Let me read it,
Mhm.
and then Miss Barber, if you could play, you know, teacher here, and how can we guide students to look at their writing and make determinations as to whether they possess a strong line of reasoning in their essay. In
That sounds good.
paragraphs in paragraphs 7 and 8, after a brief conversation between characters, the narrator is not afraid to voice his criticism. Hawthorne has him do so in a brief monologue directed at Zenobia. It is within this monologue that his true feelings come out and have a strong effect on Zenobia's state, causing her to become flustered. By having the narrator express his criticism in the form of a monologue, a stronger effect is delivered on the audience, and in this case, Zenobia. This reflects the narrator's strong attitude towards Zenobia. So what's done well and what could use
So
some
there's some
strengthening?
good things in this paragraph. This student is talking about a specific part of the text and even giving us some insight on it. The narrator in these two paragraphs are not afraid to voice his criticism, specifically through this brief monologue where we see his true feelings come out and the effect of that. So I like that. Um, we have this monologue and now we see the effect on Zenobia. It causes her to be flustered. So those are some good things that the writer does. I would like, if this were my student writing, to see some quotes pulled in. I mean, always like less we the writer does focus here, but really what specific words, what specific phrases in this monologue do you think has what causes that strong effect on Zenobia? What specific phrases, what specific words? And then take it the next step. Why would these specific words and phrases why would that cause her to be flustered? That's what I would tell my student they need to do to further develop this paragraph out. So I do like the idea. I do like I don't disagree with anything that's what is said here, but I think pulling in quotes, specific words and phrases. And if you go back and look at row B on the reasoning, row B, the commentary and evidence and commentary section, what separates, one of the main things that separates 3 points from 4 points is have students use specific words and phrases and detailed out, um, analysis on them. And so I would say, depending on the rest of the essay, this would fall more in the 3 category, but we really need those specific words and phrases and the effects of the specific words and phrases on Zenobia.
Absolutely. So specificity is the goal, right?
Yep. So today we've talked about a thesis statement, and hopefully you've seen that a thesis statement can not only answer the prompt, but it can establish a line of reasoning so that you are set up to show the progression of your argument. If you can go ahead and do that in your thesis statement, then your essay just has to deliver and you are set up to write a good essay. It's all connected right there in the thesis. So that's the goal, to write a thesis statement that shows the line of reasoning.
Perfect. Now we have a lot of new information to share with the community, right?
Yes.
The first bit of information is something that I'm actually really excited about. The College Board has collaborated now with quill.org. So all of you listen up, okay? Specifically teachers right now, okay? Quill.org and the College Board are working together, and you go in and you create an account, and it's free. The College Board has taken care of all of this. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to misspeak here, Miss Barber, but it's available for now, and I think
Yeah,
it's going to be
that's my
available for next
understanding.
year as well.
Yep.
So teachers, you create an account, you set your students up. Students will take a diagnostic assessment, and then they're going to be led through 10-minute lessons based on grammatical concepts that were that show that your students need based on the assessment that they take. So it seems like a great tool. I have not used it with my students yet, but I'm excited to use it with the students. Those of you who were at APAC this past year, Mr. Packer had mentioned something about a writing tool, a writing instrument, and he had us vote about whether we thought it would be a great tool. I'm hoping this is it. I think this is it. I'm really excited about it. So as soon as we're done today, I'm setting up my account and I'm going to use it with my students, and I'm sure that they're going to love me for it because
Yeah, I'm
you know what?
not
Actually, I think my students will be happy to use this because they ask me for this sort of instruction all the time. It's important for the SAT. It's important to improve their writing. They know they need it. They know they want it, and now we have it, and it's free. So I'm not complaining.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with this, so I'm looking into digging in and just seeing what all's available through this program.
Absolutely, and distance learning, right? So this is right
This
up our
is where we
alley now.
are. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
this is great. The other thing, and now I'm talking to the students mainly. So far, teachers have had to assign practices for you using AP Classroom, but now we have some things available to you. So if you were to log in um, into your AP Classroom account and you click on AP Classroom, first you can catch all these YouTube lessons here on the YouTube live stream in the second box, but in the first box where it says practice answering free response exam questions, if you click on that, it's going to bring you here. Optional student practice. When you click on these continue and begin buttons, well, you got to begin before you continue. You're going to get different free response questions. Now, These free response questions have been selected because they are the closest to what you're going to experience this year in terms of the skills that are going to be tested, and also the question type that
The
you're going to
prompts.
encounter, the prompts. When you do this, you answer in the text box at the bottom, and then you click submit. Once you submit, it'll ask you if you're sure that you want to submit, and then it allows you to review or to review possible um, answers or points. And I think it works different for different subject areas where you could see what could earn you points. So this example that we received is using biology, and biology has discrete points that can be awarded. So students could see sample explanations that would reward or award the point, and then they can actually go back to their responses and make adjustments, which is great because, you know, this isn't an assessment. It's not a summative assessment. This is practice. So if you see what gets you the point and you know you didn't do it, well, then go back and try to rework your writing so that you can maximize your points, but so you can learn how to maximize your points. And then you can submit it. And you
And
have
I love this. Like my students all the time, before I score their essay and give them any feedback, my students have to score their own essay, and then they have to tell me why they gave themselves that score. So I not only want my students writing, but I want my students thinking about their writing and assessing their own writing, because as I tell them, I'm not going with you to college. So you can't rely on me to know if you're writing well. You've got to train yourself to assess your own writing. I think that's probably one of the things that we as teachers can do to best serve our students, help them think about their own writing and learn how to self-assess their own writing. So this is a perfect opportunity for you to do this, and you don't have to wait for your teacher to assign it to you. You are in charge of the progress you're going to make. So you can jump on in and do this on your own.
absolutely, but because you like to have essays assigned to you, like that segue, tonight's
Yeah,
homework.
that was a smooth progression of your argument
There
today.
you go. Tonight's homework is to write an essay. Now, this is the only essay I believe we're having you write this week, because we're going to be using this essay to talk about what an essay should have. And remember, we're putting all these skills together now. It's on Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge, 19th century text. This is the original prompt, so it's not reworked. It's not, remember, this year's exam, we won't get the author and the title, but we're going to keep it as is because we're going to use student samples based on this, and it'll sound strange for the student samples when they talk about Mayor of Casterbridge and you're like, how did they know, right? So this is the exact prompt as it was and the exact passage, and we're asking you to write the full essay. You know, I'm also going to say, why don't you go ahead and time yourselves? Time yourselves for
Yep.
45 minutes, and this might be a good
Do what you're going to do on
do what you're going
exam
to do.
day. I
Right.
pushed this out to my students this morning, and I said, I want you to like sit where you think you're going to sit on exam day. If you think you're going to type, I want you to type it. If you think you're going to handwrite, I want you to handwrite it. Then I want you to practice uploading it. Like I want you to, whatever you think you're going to do on exam day, that's what I want you doing today. We're going to practice what we're going to do, not only our writing, but our routine, because the less surprises on exam day, the better.
Absolutely. And we got to remember line of reasoning. We got to remember thesis. We have to remember shifts. We have to remember characterization. We have to remember
Yep.
contrast. We have to remember literary devices, imagery, setting. It's all up for grabs. Show us what you can do.
Yeah.
We want you to be proud of what you've accomplished. Okay.
And
So
you will be. All of this is going to be second nature. And like I tell my kids, all the time, you're taking the test. The test is not taking you. You're taking the test. So it is time for you to show what you know. Show us what you know. You've spent a year refining your skills and learning how to dive deeper. Let's see it. Show what you know.
That's right. And with that, we sign off for the day. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Stay safe, be kind to each other, and write that essay.
See y'all tomorrow.